interesting news. Recent focus groups conducted by the Super PAC Republican voters against Trump found that swing voters don't like Harris. And focus groups conducted by the Democratic National Committee also found Harris rubbed some people the wrong way. So, Jonah, how big a drag is Kamala Harris on the ticket?
I think she's a pretty big drag. I think she was arguably Biden's worst political decision of his presidency.
How about that? Isn't that amazing? And welcome to Monday. It is the Chris Plant Show. Chris is on a cruise. Mike Opelka in for my pal. And that was from April of this year. This very year. Yes, in April of this year, CNN had a panel that was just talking about what a drag Kamala was on Joe Biden's chances to get reelected. Seriously. And look what's happened in the last week. It's been a week and a day since Joe Biden put out his little note saying that he was passing the torch, not the Olympic torch, but the Democrat nomination torch. And never mind the fact that Kamala Harris and I got the exact same number of votes to become the Democratic nominee. She is now the presumptive Democrat nominee. Isn't that astounding? Isn't that just amazing? Yes, and it's true. Yeah, welcome to 99 days. Well, technically 98 days and a bunch of hours before the election. 98 days and a whole bunch of hours until Election Day comes to a close. Now, that's kind of a weird statement because we do have early voting starting in September. So we are a month and 2 days away from the month where some states will begin voting, which is kind of weird. And if you read the Washington Post over the weekend, you probably saw the article that said states, they're not really critically important. States like Pennsylvania and Michigan might take a few days to count all of the mail-in votes. Gee, what a surprise that they're already seeding the clouds of doubts on the election. Pennsylvania, an important swing state that it's regarded, if you win Pennsylvania, you're pretty much going to win the presidency because this race is so tight. We know that one or two states can swing it, hence the name swing state, right? That's what we call them, swing states, because of that. Boy, oh boy, is this going to be interesting. The Washington Post already seeding the clouds of discontent. It was a busy weekend. It was a busy weekend for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. They were out and about. It was a busy weekend for Kamala Harris, who was picking up more checks in the Northeast. And we have a mountain of statements. But one of the more interesting things that came out of this weekend from the political end of things, because there's plenty of stuff to talk about in the world of the Olympics, and trust me, we'll get to that because I'm sure you have thoughts on the opening ceremonies, which I watched with rapt attention. And now I'm watching the backpedaling and explaining with rapt attention as well. But I have questions. But the Harris campaign, which again has gotten 0 votes from Democrat voters, gotten absolutely 0 votes. There were no primary voters who voted for Kamala Harris. They are now deciding that they're going to call Donald Trump weird. They're going to try and paint Donald Trump as the weird one here. And it's really amazing to me. You want to call Donald Trump weird? Why? Why do you want to call Donald Trump weird? Is it because of all the things he wants to do? Is it because of all the prosperity he wants for this country? I don't get it. But this is the horse the Democrats have decided to saddle up and start riding for 98 and a half days. I give you the example because, again, the Democrats have decided the word weird, and I might add creepy, weird and creepy has been added to the Democrat lexicon when it comes to referencing Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. And we'll get to Vance's old emails to a friend of his, which were turned over to the New York Times, in which they spun in the perfect leftist propaganda way they could. I'm very worried about J.D. Vance as well because the left has really targeted him. But we'll see. He certainly stood up at the rally this weekend. But here is the weird guy. Remember, the Democrats are painting Donald Trump as weird, weird, weird. Here's the weird guy and what he wants to do for America.
With your vote this election, inflation will stop, the illegal aliens will be turned back, the cartels will be in retreat, crime will fall, energy prices will plummet, incomes will soar, and a world in chaos will rapidly be transformed into a planet of peace.
People of St. Cloud, Minnesota seemed to appreciate that, didn't they? They certainly did. Hard to argue with those promises. Donald Trump also made a point of saying he will keep men out of women's sports, which also means he'll keep men out of women's locker rooms. And I know a lot of women who say, gee, that's kind of what I'm for, too. It is astounding what we saw changing. And the choices could not be more clear. I have friends who say, well, do you think she represents a real threat? No, only from the standpoint of the people who don't vote with their brains. They vote with their nether regions. If you're only voting because of your tender vegetation, then you're not really a smart person, are you? You're kind of weird. If you're not voting with your wallet, if you're not voting with your sense of safety, if you're not voting with your common sense, then I find you to be the weird one. But I could be wrong. I could be wrong on this one. It was really amazing to me to watch this all start congealing, as it were. And people may have forgotten. And that's why we're here. We're here to remind them. We're here to tell them really what's going on. One of the vice presidential possibilities for Kamala Harris reportedly is Governor Walz of Minnesota, who was speechifying in a T-shirt and a like a camouflage cap, like he was going out to do either a yard work project or he's going to do some painting. But he was out on the campaign trail stumping for Kamala Harris. And he's a guy they're going to use because he's a plain speaker. And he doesn't speak in word salads. And he's now being credited as the guy who came up with the weird line. These guys are just weird. They're not the threat to democracy. They're just weird. Weird. Think about that. When's the last time we had a major political party and a former president at that being labeled weird by their opponent? There's so much to get to today. It is a ton of great information from the weekend and great clips from the weekend. Mayor Pete was out and about. There are people who still think Mayor Pete's a possible VP nominee. And you could see where Kamala would want to use him in that role. He's a good attack dog. He was on with Shannon Bream. I kind of wish Shannon Bream had been a little more proactive. A little more of a, hey, hold on a second here, Mr. Secretary, but she's very polite. She's also one of the smartest people you'll ever meet over at Fox News. Shannon Bream had Mayor Pete on. I have to play some of those clips today. And we'll get your take on all of it as well. 888-630-9625 is the number here at the Chris Plant Show. I'm almost overwhelmed at the wealth of stuff we have to look into. The Kamala Harris group of vice presidential nominees. I already mentioned Walz. I mentioned Mayor Pete. We have to look at Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania. Although John King worries that, his Jewish faith might be a problem. And let's all remember that John King, over at CNN, the guy who was formerly married to Dana Bash, John King was Catholic before he married Dana Bash, and he converted to Judaism, married Dana Bash, and then after they split, I don't know if he came back. Just a thought. We have to check on that. But we also have Mark Kelly, who's, I guess, the one that is rumored to have been Barack Obama's pick instead of Kamala Harris. There's a very interesting article from Seymour Hersh who says that Obama engineered the palace coup. And Obama's the guy who forced Joe Biden out. Well, welcome to the party, pal. I think we all understood that. But Obama may have wanted it to be Mark Kelly and not Kamala at the top of the ticket. Former astronaut, guy served in the military. His wife was horribly wounded by a shooter, Gabby Giffords, in case you're not paying attention. And that would have been great fodder for campaign ads, etc. And now we learn about Mark Kelly, that he may be the leading candidate among the Kamala Harris sweepstakes, but we also have to ask him about his participation in a spy balloon company funded by China. Gee, isn't that interesting? Where have we heard the term spy balloon before? Oh, that's right. It was under this administration. And the fact that China was allowed to fly spy balloons, not just over America, but near some of our military bases before we shot them down over the Atlantic Ocean. Kelly's company that Fox is reporting on started out with a focus on space tourism via balloons. Space tourism via balloons. Then why is it being called a spy balloon company? And oddly, we allowed a spying balloon to fly over the country for days and days and days before it finally drifted over the ocean and we shot it down. Senator Kelly, can you answer about your ties to a company that was partially funded by China, where we know everything that's funded by China, even partially, is funded by the Chinese government? Yeah, one of China's largest corporations was one of the funders of this corporation. Just amazing to me. And nobody in the mainstream media outside of Fox seems to be that interested in this side of the story. And I think they should be. I really think they should be. All right, we have so much on our plate today, as I've said. I have been watching the Olympics all weekend, and I will get your opinions on the ceremonies. And you have to remember, you have to put on every statement about those ridiculous opening ceremonies, it's France. Really, it's France. Do you really care? And for everybody who wants the Olympic athletes to immediately pack up their bags and come home, we have to have a talk about that. I have friends, actual friends, who said, we have to bring them home now. They must come home now. What do you think? 888-630-9625. Jasmine's on the phones. Jeff Wolf is on the board. Mike Opelka's at the mic for Chris Plant right here on a Monday on the Chris Plant Show. Let's go.
You're listening to The Chris Plant Show.
It is The Chris Plant Show. Mr. Plant is on holiday. He's on a cruise ship in the North Atlantic, I believe. I'm not exactly sure where he is. We didn't put one of those Apple tags on him. Maybe we should have put one in Michael Piercy's luggage as well. That way we could track him. Wouldn't that be fun? We could put a map up on the Chris Plant Show website and say, all right, this is where he is today. I know there was some consumption of adult beverages that happened on the cruise, which is always fun. That's always a good thing. And we endorse that. There was congregating happening. But I will be here throughout the vacation. It's Mike Opelka, and we will try and cover as much of the news and information as we can in the fashion that Chris has trained you to appreciate, and we'll share our opinions. Some of the opinions are about the political happenings of the weekend, and others about what's happening halfway around the world or a quarter of the way around the world in France with the Olympics. Although the surfing's not in France, which is really bizarre to me. And we'll talk about the opening ceremonies. But right now I'm doing a little lightning round on the phones. Robert is in Waldorf, Maryland. Hello, Robert. Welcome to the Chris Plant Show.
Good morning. I keep hearing about how we can't have driver's licenses, to be checked in for voting. You need that, but and how abortion's a right. But yet, here, look at the Democrats. They've stolen the voting rights. All they worry about, they carry on about the voting rights. We can't infringe upon the voter, but yet they've just violated the voting rights of all the Democrat Party. 14 million voters, from what I understand, to completely shut down the whole voting system because they didn't like the result they got, took all those people, stripped their right as an American citizen, the right to vote. The one thing that we have in this country, the right to vote, and the Democrats have no problem, and the news media, getting on the TV and telling you how proud they are that they have stripped this right of these people. And they sit back, and if you vote for the Democrats, you have surrendered your right as an American citizen to vote, your number one right, and you've given that up. And they sit back and they have no problem stealing an election because they don't like the results. But, I mean, look at this. You no longer have the right to vote as a Democrat. Good luck. Vote for that, buddy.
Robert, you're so right. And I find, because I live in a community surrounded by a bunch of Democrats and communists and socialists and anarchists, I think my wife and I might be the town capitalists. We might be a quota hire here. But they're not going to listen to our loud protestations. I just ask, well, here's what I do. I ask them all, who voted for Kamala? How many primaries did she win? Because Ronald McDonald has gotten more primary votes than Kamala Harris. And we're starting to see that worm turn just a little bit. You're starting to see, as we saw, Black Lives Matter last week said, hold on a second. You're seeing people like Charlemagne the God, misspelled the, Charlemagne the God, and I doubt he's a god, is saying, wait a minute, we didn't vote for this. We did not vote for this. So I'm hoping there'll be an awakening, but I want to also keep pressing that all of us talk about what Kamala wants to do, what her plans are, what her policies are, and what she really is planning on doing to America. Not for America, to America. See, that's what the Democrats are all about. It's not doing something for America. It's doing something to America. And I think you know what I mean when I say doing something to America. Mike Opelka in for Chris Plant on The Chris Plant Show.
This is The Chris Plant Show.
It is the Chris Plant Show on a Monday, and we're almost finished with July. Isn't that amazing? Thursday's going to be August. Where did the summer go? It's Mike Opelka in for my friend Chris Plant, who's on vacation, and from all accounts on social media, having a great time, as he should. I'm looking over some of the madness from the weekend since we were last here, and the Democrats have outdone themselves. We will get to that. There is a lot of discussion about the Olympics, and Jeffy and I were talking about that during the break too. Jeff Wolf and I were discussing that, and I'm sure many of you have opinions on it, and we will get to that because I do think it's important for us to support our American athletes. Think of all the work they've done for the last 4 years to get to where they are. And there certainly were some great displays over the last few days of American athletic ability, and we saw some pretty big displays by some other countries too. We'll get into that. I do want to talk about the lack of honesty, the lack of truthfulness by some on the left side of the political spectrum One of them is a lady named Letitia James, Attorney General out of the city of New York, the one who went after Donald Trump, the one who campaigned on putting Donald Trump behind bars. Remember, her entire campaign was about, I will lock him up and you will never, ever, ever have to worry about Donald Trump again. And she wanted to go after all his properties, too. All she wanted was Donald Trump. She was a frothing, salivating, crazy person before she got elected. And then after Donald Trump went through the political process, she talked about getting his properties. She talked about getting her hands on all those Trump properties.
If he does not have funds to pay off the judgment, then we will seek, judgment enforcement mechanisms in court. And we will ask the judge to seize his assets. We are prepared to make sure that the judgment is paid to New Yorkers. And yes, I look at 40 Wall Street each and every day.
Can you imagine the Trump properties in the hands of the New York government? Such incredible properties. We talked last week about the D.C. hotel that Donald Trump secured from D.C. for no money, then put $200 million into renovating it, turned massive profit on it, and the city shared it. The district shared in the profits, and now it's bankrupt. And Trump might even buy it again. Who knows? But Letitia James was all about anti-Trump. That's all she campaigned on. This was her whole raison d'etre, if you will.
Running for Attorney General because I will never be afraid to challenge this illegitimate president when our fundamental rights are at stake.
She's an election denier, too. I forgot about that. She is an election denier. This is Letitia James on the stump trying to become the Attorney General of New York, and she did get there. And that's the delusional Democrat who's in charge of the Attorney General's office in New York. Well, she was on television this weekend on MSNBC, and she's now all in for Kamala Harris. Anyone shocked? Anyone stunned? Anyone surprised that Letitia James has backed Kamala Harris? Anything she can do to go after Donald Trump? But she seems confused. This little clip, my jaw dropped at the stupidity here. Remember, this is the lady who spent her entire political capital getting elected so she could go after Donald Trump.
The great state of New York. I and my other colleagues, all Democratic attorney generals, have endorsed Kamala Harris for president of these United States. And I think an attorney general obviously knows, is in the best position to know what a former attorney general is capable of. And Kamala Harris clearly is capable and is the most qualified individual to run for president. In fact, more qualified than the last four presidents.
So the Attorney General, who I guess has some kind of kinship with Kamala Harris because they had the same title on their business cards at one time. Attorney General Letitia James said that Kamala Harris, she started to say, is probably the most qualified. And then she said, no, she is the most qualified. Here it is again.
Of. And Kamala Harris clearly is capable and is the most qualified individual to run for president. In fact, more qualified than the last four presidents.
More qualified than the last four presidents. Let's see, who were the last four presidents? Well, Joe Biden, well, he's still the president. So the president before Joe Biden, well, that was Donald Trump. And we know she hates Trump. So that's kind of a default position. And the president before Trump, well, that was Barack Obama, and he had 2 terms. So does she think, that Kamala Harris is more qualified than Barack Obama? Is that what she's saying? Because that's kind of what it feels like. And based on the exact language she used, that is what she's saying. That Kamala Harris is more qualified than Donald Trump, even though he had 4 years as president and decades as a successful businessman. But Kamala Harris, a public employee A member of a very protected class in this country. Politicians are that, aren't they? She's never had any real world experience that we know of. She's only been a public servant. And isn't that ironic, the words public servant, because they kind of look at us as their servants? Kamala Harris, more qualified than the 4 previous people to run for president. Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Barack Obama, and maybe she's going back to Bush, too. A guy who had experience as a governor before he became president as well. I can't believe these people are taken seriously. It really is interesting to me how they have circled the wagons around somebody who they themselves thought was a bad idea. The left thought Kamala Harris was a very bad idea. If you weren't here for the very opening of the show, it was April of this year that CNN had a panel discussing the fact that Kamala Harris was a drag on the ticket with Joe Biden.
Interesting news. Recent focus groups conducted by the super PAC Republican voters against Trump found that swing voters don't like Harris. And focus groups conducted by the Democratic National Committee also found Harris rubs some people the wrong way. So
now, I'm old enough to remember when, I guess it was June, that many people were speculating on what it was going to take to get Kamala off the ticket, what they were going to have to offer her. What was the buyout package? Remember when we were talking about Justice Sotomayor being pushed off the ticket, off the Supreme Court, so Kamala could be given a lifetime appointment in the Supreme Court, and then they could replace her. And there were myriad names thrown out to replace Kamala Harris. There were people raising their hands. Gretchen Whitmer, of course. Gavin Newsom. Shapiro. Governor Wes Moore of Maryland. Pritzker had his hand up. It was just a couple of weeks ago, technically, that we were talking about moving a Supreme Court justice out so Biden would be able to nominate a replacement, and that likely replacement would be Kamala Harris, who would, again, check more boxes for Joe. But now suddenly all of that has been forgotten. All of that is wiped from your memory. It's like the Men in Black showed up with those little flash sticks and wiped out all the memories of how bad Kamala Harris was. Boy, when you're a member of the party, capital P, party, you really jump, don't you? You really leap on top of it. I'm not the only one paying attention here and noticing this. Let's bounce over to the phones now that I've had my little spleen venting happening. Phil is in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Hello, Phil. Welcome to the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, look, I just want to say Kamala Harris is the most dangerous presidential candidate we've ever had. She is an avowed communist. She's already espoused ideals of eliminating private ownership of anything. She wants to be a dictator in the White House, and she wants to tell everyone how they can live, and she wants to eliminate private ownership of almost everything. So this is the most important election we will ever have, and Donald Trump is the only person to vote for if you actually ever want to live in a free America again.
Well, she hasn't come out and said, I'm a communist, so I don't know if we can say she's an avowed communist. She's made some statements about redistribution of wealth in order to make sure everyone has equity, not equality. Oh, yeah. So she has made some statements. I don't think we could fairly say, well, she's got her member of the Communist Party card. She just lives the example and speaks that way. And when she was on with, I guess it was one of the O'Donnells. There's a Nora O'Donnell and there's the other O'Donnell. And was being asked about her socialist perspective. And let's remember, socialism is the great gateway drug to communism. This was her reaction to that.
And is that a socialist or progressive perspective?
No.
Yeah, so just laugh it off is the answer. Just laugh it away, cackle it away. Nobody will say anything if you cackle it away. And that's what she did. She is so progressive. We can't forget 2019, Michael Moore was praising Joe Biden for picking Kamala Harris because she was farther left than Bernie Sanders. When you're farther left than Bernie Sanders and you get an award for it, you don't get to scrub that. You don't get to wipe that out. You don't get to eliminate that from history. Donald Trump was talking about it this past weekend when he was at a rally. He pointed out the censorship, the rewriting of history, if you will, from the members of the mainstream media.
Over the past 3.5 years, Baltazar Harris, which is what she called herself, even the New York Times today, they took an article out of the New York Times, Baltazar. Now, they're deleting everything that says, these people back there are deleting everything. But we already have it.
Yes, we have it. We have the receipts, and we're going to keep showing you the receipts that we have for this behavior. That was a fun moment at the rally. I've got more from the St. Cloud rally as well. Thank you, Phil. One more. Let's get one more in here. Mark is in Landover Hills, Maryland. Hello, Mark. Welcome to the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, Mike. Good to hear you subbing for Chris as always, buddy. You do a great job.
Thank you, sir. What's
hey,
on
buddy,
your mind?
I just wanted to say a couple things about what you brought up earlier in the show. And hey,
All
man,
right.
you're 100% correct. These people that are going around and saying that Donald Trump is a weirdo. Now, remember, these are the same groups of people that don't know what sex they are from day to day or condone that type of conduct and condone physical mutilation of kids and letting kids control or set the itinerary. And as far as Kamala Harris goes, Mike, let's face it, she was a flop from the beginning. She has been nothing but a specialized gift given to her to put her in the position she's in, and she will not be a good leader of our country. She does not understand the Constitution, and she is one of those people that thinks it's okay to teach hatred. All they do, Mike, is teach hatred and hateful things because it's easy for them. It's much easier to be hateful and to grab a hold of hate than it is to be nice and help people, Mike.
Well, you're right, sir. Thank you for being there. She is one of the people who points the finger and doesn't realize that three are pointing right back at her. Those fingers are pointing right back at her. Whatever they accuse you of, they are likely doing themselves. That is true. And the fact that Kamala used to insult the 18 to 24-year-olds and call them stupid has been forgotten. Do we not remember? Do we not remember when Kamala Harris was talking about college students?
Remember, age is more than a chronological fact. What else do we know about this population, 18 through 24? They are stupid. That is why we put them in dormitories, and they have a resident assistant. They make really bad decisions.
Yeah. Like voting for you would be a really bad decision. That should be in an ad somewhere, too. That's Kamala. And what she thinks of the 18 to 24-year-olds, they're stupid. Stupid. Somebody needs to share that, too. 888-630-9625 is the number. So much more to get to today. It's Mike Opelka in for Chris Plant on the radio all across America on the Chris Plant Show.
There's only one Chris Plant. The Chris Plant Show.
It is the Chris Plant Show on this Monday, 98 and a half days away from Election Day, July 29th. So much happening. It's also Chicken Wing Day, which I don't know who picks these. I'm sure that there's some kind of lobbying group that lobbies to get these days on the calendar. This is National Chicken Wing Day. And I say that because I'm laughing about the Ohio Supreme Court last week ruled that boneless chicken wings can have bones. I know. You're sitting there shaking your head going, wait, what? Yes, that's a weird thing. Boneless chicken wings can have bones, according to the Ohio Supreme Court. And this was a case about a guy who had ordered boneless chicken wings off the menu. They said boneless chicken wings. He bit into one of them. It had a bone. It tore his esophagus. It was not a minor injury. It was a pretty big deal. So he ended up suing and went to court. And apparently Big Chicken Wing has good lawyers. And they convinced the court, it was a 4-3 decision, that you, the consumer, does not have a reasonable expectation to expect there won't be bones in boneless chicken wings. To which I asked the question, has the state of Ohio solved every other problem that the boneless chicken wing suit has gone to this level? I don't anticipate it will be going to the United States Supreme Court, but one never knows. One never really knows in these days. We have a lot to get to, and I promise you I want to try and stay in touch with as many of you as possible. Let's grab one more call before we get out of here this hour. Matt in Arlington, Virginia. Welcome to the Chris Plant Show. Matthew?
Mike, thank you so much for bringing a great word to our attention, and that is the government run by the worst people. And what is that word?
Kakistocracy.
Correct.
That is right.
It will now have to be modified to Cacklestocracy.
Ooh, I like what you're doing here, Matthew. This is a portmanteau. This is which is your SAT word of the hour, by the way. A portmanteau, where we take a couple of words and we smush them together and create a new word. With Kamala Harris at the helm of the Democrat Party, now that Joe is a lame duck, she is the cackler in chief, and she is the leader of the Harris Kakistocracy, which will heretofore be known as the Cacklestocracy. That is
even worse.
Well, we hope to put it to a very brief term, meaning she won't be in office after this term. So, Matt,
Amen.
That's very well done, proving once again the Chris Plant audience is the smartest audience anywhere. Cacklestocracy. Well done, Matt. Well done. It's Mike Opelka in for Chris Plant right here on the Chris Plant Show.